Thank you. My first year of law school, I took a class in negotiation. I loved this class, and this class was going to change my life. But one day, we had an entire session devoted to studying the differences between how men and women negotiate. Are you kidding me? I remember thinking. I hated this. There is some stereotype that women are supposed to be nicer than men? Yuck. So why did I hate this so much? Well, I had never learned that girls were supposed to be nicer than boys. As the oldest of four, I had of course learned to take turns and share. But I had also learned that it was okay to use my age and my size to get what I want. And family stories backed me up. Here's the example I remember being told. My grandparents, when they got married as newlyweds, went and bought a brand new set of furniture. But when they went to the store to pick up their new set of furniture, the store had declared bankruptcy. It was the Depression, after all. And when my grandmother went to see the store manager, he told her that all of the assets, including their set of furniture that she could still see on the showroom floor, were being seized to pay creditors. My great-grandmother would have none of this. She marched herself down to the store and, I am told, sat on the furniture, shooing the store manager, creditors, and anyone else away until that furniture was loaded into a truck and delivered to her daughter. So what did I learn from this? Don't take no for an answer. If you're right, it's okay to be a hardline negotiator. In short, by the time I got to law school, I thought I had clearly learned that women could and should negotiate anything. I hadn't seen a stereotype, and I didn't believe it. After graduating law school, I was soon hired to teach negotiation, and I was so excited to get this job that I accepted the offer immediately. Let me back up. I was hired to teach negotiation, and I did not negotiate my offer. And there it was. What had happened? And was this a gender thing after all? I started looking at gender and negotiation immediately and have studied it for the last 20 years of my career. Today, we're going to talk about 3 myths of negotiation. The myth that women don't negotiate, that women shouldn't negotiate, and that women can't negotiate. So, why do we have these myths? If you want to explain why women are still being paid less than men, or are not represented in leadership roles in Fortune 500 companies or in law firms, these myths conveniently blame the women. And therefore, no laws need to be changed. No company needs to think about fairness. These myths maintain the status quo. If you think, however, that the situation is perhaps more nuanced, you're correct. The first myth is that women don't negotiate, and my situation seems to be the classic, not negotiating over salary. Where do these myths come from? Studies of undergraduate students playing games in social science labs and surveys of recent grads point to the conclusion that women are less likely than men to negotiate over money in competitive situations with limited information. And already, we should see problems with this paradigm. Lab studies instead of the reality. Undergrads instead of mature adults, and limited information where, in fact, more information may be found. So let's fill in the picture. There are lots of other elements of a job to negotiate other than salary. And women, not surprisingly, are much more likely than men to negotiate over family issues. For me, pregnant with my first child, I negotiated my start date, a reduced course load, my teaching package, my travel budget, and maternity leave. My guess is my dean did not perceive me as not negotiating, even when I immediately accepted the salary offer. Second, we know that training matters. The undergraduate students in the study above who did not negotiate started to negotiate in equal rates once they were trained. And in my studies of law students who self-select into a field of advocacy and then have 3 years of teaching about this, there is absolutely no difference between the genders in the propensity to negotiate or in the amount of money received when they do. Finally, to whatever extent we think that there might be differences that lead into these stereotypes, these differences are evaporating. A study of the workplace in Australia, conducted in 2013 to 2014, showed absolutely no difference between men and women in the likelihood to ask for a raise. Furthermore, when women did not ask for a raise, it wasn't based on some old idea that not asking would harm the relationship. Which brings us to our second myth, that women shouldn't negotiate. Sometimes when we think about why women might not negotiate, we hear the concern that you won't be liked if you're pushy. Men and women have been socialized to see that women are supposed to get along, to make nice, and to be a team player. Movies, media, and politics all play into the story. We don't have to talk about this election. Let's go back to 2008, where we had Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin. You could be liked, or you could be competent, but you could not be both. And early cases of sex discrimination in the workplace show exactly the same likability versus competence choice at play. In these instances, women were penalized if they acted too much like men because they were seen as aggressive and therefore unlikable. But they were also penalized if they acted too much like women because they were seen as lacking leadership skills and therefore incompetent. However, we now know that current research is showing this myth, the fear of backlash, is perhaps overblown. And let me give you an example. One time over winter break when I was in high school, I was hired for a part-time job to hand out flyers for an insurance company at a department store. So, as customers would come into the department store, I would hand them a flyer, and the perfume women would offer a sample spritz. After a day of talking to the perfume ladies, I discovered that they were being paid about 3 times as much as me, and there did not seem to be a real difference in the skill set required. So after one whole day of work, I marched myself to my boss's office and in front of everyone demanded a raise. Well, guess what? I was fired on the spot. Gender bias at work? I don't think so. I was obnoxious, unaware of what others were making around me, put the boss in a terrible position, and frankly, expendable. I was just a bad negotiator. And in closer looks at studies that had suggested that women face a backlash, we know that actually negotiation expectations and rewards are the same. Both men and women are rewarded for amiable, firm, pleasant, and assertive demeanors, while both men and women are punished for obnoxious, aggressive, and overly competitive demands. Had I thought about that in my negotiation in the department store, I bet my dad wouldn't have fired me. Which brings us to our third myth, that women can't negotiate. This myth is based on the idea that women are inherently less assertive than men, and that assertiveness is the only skill needed for negotiation effectiveness. In fact, there are many skills that contribute to negotiation effectiveness, and in my teaching and studying this for the last 20 years, I now group them into 5 categories: assertiveness, empathy, flexibility, social intuition, and ethicality. In order to be an effective negotiator, you need all of these skills. So let's review them in reverse order. Ethicality refers to both your reputation and trustworthiness in a negotiation. And women's higher interest in social capital and building relationships can be seen as an advantage here. Social intuition is building rapport with your counterpart in the negotiation, reading verbal and nonverbal cues like body language and eye contact, and then mirroring these cues in order to smooth the social interaction of the negotiation. Again, women are seen as having an advantage here. Flexibility refers to both outcome and process flexibility in a negotiation. Can you find different ways of getting what you need? And there does not appear to be any difference between the genders in this particular skill. Empathy is your understanding of the other side in the negotiation, the cognitive ability to see where they are coming from, even when you don't agree with them, and to understand their emotional state as well. Again, women are seen as having an advantage here. The last skill is assertiveness, and this is the only skill where women are seen as lacking. Assertiveness is the ability to make strong arguments for your point of view, understanding how to frame those arguments in order to make them more persuasive, and then having the verbal ability to stand up and make those arguments. And here is where women might be lacking. So why do we think that women might sometimes be less assertive than men? Likely socialization and fear of backlash. And here's how we know this. In studies of lawyers, where assertiveness on behalf of clients is both socially expected and rewarded, there is no difference in perceived negotiation effectiveness. Similarly, in law school classes, negotiation professors have found no difference between the genders in terms of their skill set. So we know that we need to socialize both men and women to reward and expect negotiation in all contexts. We also need to start this socialization earlier. And this is exactly what the Girl Scouts are doing with a new badge called Win-Win. In order to get this badge, a young girl needs to complete 10 negotiation exercises. Furthermore, when there is an imbalance in the workplace, like a science department or a law firm, women are less likely to negotiate. So we need to protect negotiation in the workplace while not punishing anyone for early lack of assertiveness. Massachusetts, in fact, has just passed a law doing this. It is now illegal in Massachusetts for an employer to ask about your previous salary. In other words, if you, like me, did not negotiate early on over numbers, that should not impact what is fair pay today. My first raise was when my dean gave me one the next year in order to keep me up with a new hire. He was committed to structural fairness, and we should insist that that be the case everywhere. Furthermore, when women are viewed as both breadwinners and caregivers, it makes it more likely that this equal treatment will occur. Finally, we know that women are just as likely as men to negotiate when they have full knowledge of the situation. Increased transparency within companies about salaries and benefits make it more likely that women will ask for and receive that equal treatment. So out of 5 negotiation skills, there is only one where women in some instances and in some studies are lacking. And yet we don't worry that men, comparatively lacking social intuition and empathy, can't negotiate. We know that the best negotiators bring all of these skills to play. The most effective leaders bring all of these skills and utilize them as needed. The picture that I have painted for you today shows that the myths that women don't, shouldn't, and can't negotiate are being successfully shattered every day. I, like other women, have learned the importance of asking. And while I usually don't need to sit on the furniture in order to get what I want, I am more willing and more able to do so if needed. Thank you.